let's carry on now with multimodal H2 station. Thank you. And it's time to get back to François Gonxy from EDF, because we're going to take a local example in France. It takes place in Auxerre. It's in Burgundy-Franche-Comté region, and it will be a station deployed not only for buses, but for all kinds of vehicles. Please, go on.
Yes, thank you, Laurent. If you allow me as an introduction, just to start with a panorama. As I mentioned, Dynamics today, so Dynamics is the EDF subsidiary working on electrolyzers, is working today on 9 very advanced projects, 8 in France, 1 in Germany, representing all together the first stage of all those projects. They are not far from 50 megawatts. Among those 2 projects, there are 2 projects dedicated to decarbonization of large industrial plants, so this is not expected today, and 7 are mainly dedicated to decarbonization of local mobility sectors. That's the case for Auxerre, that's also the case for Belfort, Cannes, Loire-Vallée, Gardanne, Nice, Montpellier. That means that for us, this is the beginning of my introduction, what Thierry mentioned, that means the beginning of the volumes, is really driven at this stage for local mobility sectors, and I have to say public transportation first. So this is the main driver today. In the future, we'll see. That means when I say local mobility sector, that means buses, refuse collectors, a bit later, in a few years, trains, trucks, and let's say that's the scale of a urban area or a local territory, a department if in France, or a region. All these 9 projects where I talk about are at a quite advanced stage. They all receive support from either the European Commission, Connecting Europe Facility, or for the French Agency for Ecological Transition, the ADEME. And of course, we are very proud of the trust we gain from these 2 institutions. All those projects share common characteristics. They are all joint projects between local government, authorities, and players from the industry. And that means that those are not EDF projects. They are local projects joining efforts from public and private players. And they all start with a reliable, simple first stage, for example, where hydrogen is used only for buses. And from this first stage, we grow in the future, aggregating more and more new consumers. That means that the project is, let's say, made to be progressively scalable. And this is the other common point with all those projects. So after this introduction, if we now go a bit more into the Auxerre project a bit in detail, because that was your question. So the Auxerre project is in the first phase. The project is finally modest because it will be online by the end of this summer. It's a first 1 megawatt electrolyzer producing 400 kilo per day of green hydrogen. That's for 5 buses to start, commercial vehicles, and some trucks. That's the first phase. That's the seed to go further. And then this project will scale up in the future, probably to 3 megawatt electrolyzer, maybe to 5 megawatts. That means around 1 ton per day. First, because there will be progressively more and more buses from the cities that will switch to hydrogen first. And second, from 2024, there will be 3 regional trains using electricity and hydrogen that will enter into circulation not far from the station, and the trains are already financed by the region and bought by EDF to Alstom, by SNCF, sorry, to Alstom. And second, because and third, sorry, because the station is quite close to one of the main highway between Paris and the south of France. And finally, that was one of your questions, because the station is close to the river Yonne, when you can also aggregate boat hydrogen consumption for boats. In this project, the EDF group build and operate the electrolyzers and the station, the multimodal station. But of course, the interesting point for the OCER project is that around this station and beyond the electrolyzer, what we do ourselves, there is, I think, a remarkable ecosystem in place. First, because Berthier is creating in Auxerre the first maintenance center for hydrogen buses in France. And it's quite important because you have to reinsure let's say the drivers and the operators of the buses. So to have the maintenance center very close to the buses, it's important. It's first for Safra buses, but it will progressively extend for trucks and other manufacturers. So first, the first maintenance centers in France. Second, because in Auxerre, you have also another industrial who is Fruof, one of the main trailer manufacturers in France and in Europe. He's based in Auxerre and is working very close together with the hydrogen ecosystem in Auxerre. And third, because there is a retrofit center for diesel trucks now emerging to convert old, let's say 5 years old trucks, diesel trucks, to hydrogen and electrical trucks. And last, because all needed training programs are planned, that means from very simple courses, training courses for bus drivers to specificities of hydrogen drivers, that's important, but also for the future, we have also worked to integrate hydrogen issues on the courses of on local educational institution to prepare the future specialists for maintenance, security issues, industrial engineering, and so on. That is, you see, you have the consumers growing, the industry and manufacturers growing, the educational tissue around, let's say, putting all that together for the future. That is really, I think, from a very small project, splendid ecosystem with a splendid implication, I have to say, from the Auxerre city and from the Burgundy-Franche-Comté region. They both have, let's say, a major implication on the political vision and make it real. Because as
thanks for all these details. So it's all in one station. I would like now to turn the floor to Patrick Knuben, because there is a project for building a hydrogen station at the airport in Groningen.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Indeed, we have several hydrogen fueling stations in view to be, let's say, built and operated, of course. And one of that will be connected to our regional airport, and that's very interesting because that's also related to, let's say, preparing us to be developed to have, let's say, aviation on hydrogen in the foreseeable future, because that will take some time. By putting a fueling station in a multimodal node, to say that we have one which can fuel, let's say, one dispenser on the air side, as we call it, and one on the land side of the airport, makes a lot of sense. And in view, on top of that, this fueling station will be incorporated, embedded in our Hydrogen Valley project, which comprises the full value chain as from, let's say, production, logistics, transport, storage, large-scale storage, and use in industry, mobility, and built environment. So we are trying to build this ecosystem, and because that's the only way it will work in a dedicated region. And I think what is interesting here is this fueling station at the airport will have, let's say, various customers. Thereby the commercial attractiveness will be more, let's say, feasible. Otherwise, you will only have let's say one side, and that's a very critical business case, and we want to, let's say, see if we can even increase it, because also the hydrogen buses in the region drive around here, because we will have in operation next year about 30 hydrogen fueled buses in the region, which of course need fueling stations. There are two big ones being constructed, but it's also interesting to have one intermediate and several, of course, to be, let's say, potential backups when something needs, let's say, overhauling or maintenance, etc. And so that's the case with the airport. So it will be there. I hope. Well, will take a year or so, or 2 years, depends on let's say how the development goes. But we're very proud of that, and thereby we have a Hydrogen Valley airport, which also is a very interesting attractor for interested parties like investors.
Okay, maybe a quick reaction from Pierre-Etienne and Thierry, if they wish to make a comment about multimodal.
I'm going to have a comment. I'm sorry, I'm going to be politically incorrect. 50 years ago, when we built infrastructures for highways, for nuclear power plants, for gas transmission, for airports, we didn't do valleys. There was no Romorantin nuclear valley. There was no smallish valley project and saying, you know what, let's do it in the countryside. This idea, I mean, no offense to what in France we glorify as territoire, the idea that large companies and national governments are abdicating their responsibility in developing mass-scale infrastructures to local governments who have no competence, no funding, and no global vision. Sorry to say that. They're very nice, but they're not the ones. Saying that the future of energy in Europe relies on those small valleys, for me, I spent a lot of time in China and the US. That's not the way it works in China. I can tell you. It's not the way. If Europe wants to be nice like that, well, Europe is going to be completely left behind. So I'm going to be very serious. Now is the time to go past these valleys. Valleys are smallish things. Valleys need to be supported by government. Valleys are not industrial policy. Industrial policy should come. There should be leadership. And right now, what we see at the European level is, sorry to say that, a lack of leadership. The hydrogen plants that have been launched are today rather empty when it comes to infrastructures. What I was saying about how you deploy mass-scale refueling stations across Europe is nowhere. I mean, we're basing that on valley. So let's forget about valley. Let's look at what the US just announced. A $4 trillion infrastructure plan. Where is Europe? Europe is nowhere to be seen. US is marching. China is marching. Europe is doing valley. That's not at all what we need.
Okay, thank you for this point of view. Pierre-Etienne, maybe one quick word?
My point is that I cannot disagree with what Thierry says. I think, but I would like Thierry to be consistent, because just the former intervention, you were saying let the industry move, but that's wrong. It's only if there is a massive
leadership. Sorry, you need leadership, you need political vision and leadership, but let industry do the things. But you need a vision, you need a plan, un grand projet, as we say in France. You know, this word grand projet was something that we structured our minds. I'm not saying that we should go back to government étatiste, dirigiste ways of 50 years ago, but we should go back to the vision that the people had at that time, and now obviously have industry, not smallish government. Forget about small government. We need to have industry. Sorry.
My proposal, because we're going to hear more from Pierre-Etienne in a few seconds, because time is running, let's do the Q&A session right now, and let's turn the floor to Bruno Jamet to see if he has some questions from the audience. So, Bruno.
Yes, just a very short question about the OCR ecosystem, about the electricity. Is it coming from wind or other source?
Yes, that's good question. It's coming actually when you build the contracts to supply green electricity to electrolyzer, you have to combine several sources of electricity. So it's a combination, and it will move. This combination will evolve with the project as the project will scale up in the future. So it comes from green electricity produced in France, combined with green electricity produced in the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region. And when the project will be a bit bigger, we will combine that with very precise farms. At this stage, it does not come from a very precise plant. It comes from, let's say, a basket of plants from France in general and from the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region.
Okay, let's
combining greens, that means combining wind and solar power plants.
Okay, so several kind of renewable energies and all-in-one station.